All right, friends, today we're going to talk about that conjunction of Mars and Uranus in the sign of Gemini. They're going to join at 3 degrees on Friday. However, their orb is in effect 5 degrees before, 5 degrees after. And I would say for as long as Mars will stay in the sign of Gemini, these two planets will have an effect on each other. And I want us to keep in mind, Mars and Uranus will meet 3 times while Uranus is in the sign of Gemini. And the actual showdown is in 2030. When we have the eclipses in the sign as well as Saturn. But we'll talk about that in a few years from now. But coming back to our time, we're having the god of war, Mars, the planet of action, joining forces with Uranus, the god of interruption, disruptions, revolutions, and all of it in a sign that's related to our intellect, the interactivity and the exchange in our life, the sign of Gemini. And there's another factor I want us to look at during this video and for this transit, which is Mercury's retrograde in the sign of Cancer. And this is important because Mercury is the ruler of Gemini. So the condition of Mercury and how well Mercury can support Mars and Uranus will have a tremendous effect on what Mars and Uranus will do and can do. And one of the things that Mercury is telling us right now is that sudden change that's related to Uranus and the explosive actions that are related to Mars are not just going to be external events because the ruler is in a very internal private sign, like the sign of Cancer. So this transit is telling us that there's a relationship between our actions, thoughts, and emotions. Like a lot of people will experience this as unexpected exchanges, conversations, technological problems, the typical Mercury retrograde stuff. But beneath all of this, there's a deeper question at play, and I want us to pay attention to that. Is about what happens when the mind, the intellect, Mercury, can no longer rely on its old patterns of connectivity. So in this video, I want to go past the predictions because there's enough of that already. I want us to look at the psychology behind this conjunction because so many transits come and go and there are no apparent external manifestations. But when we pay attention to our own inner experience and how we come in relation to the external world, we start to see these transits. And I think considering that Uranus is going to be here for so many years and this Mars is going to come back 2 more times, it's talking about some sort of an evolution that involves Mars and Mercury here. Our thinking process, our way of becoming a relational agent in the world. And it's important to understand this progression. But before getting into the depth of this video and going through everything layer by layer, I just want to let you know July is ahead. It's a very explosive month. It's a little bit jolting in some ways. And those transit videos will be coming out. If you want to catch those videos, please do remember to subscribe, press that notification bell so YouTube notifies you. Now, let's briefly go through the layers because we got to understand what Mars is, what Uranus is, what Gemini is, and how all of these factors come together. And let's start with Mars. So Mars is a malefic and it has a lot to do with strife, aggression, and war. But beneath all of that, there's something more fundamental about Mars that gives it these slants and these kinds of modalities. And that's that Mars is a masculine planet, and that means it wants to be external moving, outward moving. It's energy expenditure that goes from the interiority explosively outwards. Mars is our capacity to act. It is the force that converts the inner content of our world, such as our thoughts and emotions, and it enacts it outwards. For instance, Mars represents all of our initiatives, intentions, decisions, and actions that we do take. And one of the qualities Mars has, it reduces our aperture, our subjectivity, and our perception. It just creates this very narrow line of movement. Because Mars is one-pointed. Mars looks at its goal and it's like, this is the only path ahead and I must move through it. And when Mars initiates that movement, there is no zigzagging, going back and forth, pausing and contemplating. It's like a bullet that has come out of a gun. It's going to go. It's going to pierce through. And we got to consider what a healthy Mars is like when Mars is functional. It decides that this is what needs to be done. This is what I'm going to do. And then it does it. And to get this healthy Mars, we have to have a goal that's foreseeable. This is very important. You cannot shoot the shits with Mars and expect to get to your destination with yourself or others in one piece. Mars needs a straight path that it can commit itself to. But now I want us to consider the suddenness of Uranus, the jolting that it can bring. Because Mars here might not have that moment of, I foresee, I can see my target, and I'm going to act that way. It's being jolted into action. So there's no gap between stimuli and response. It's like something happens, boom, we're triggered and we react. But let's take a minute to talk about Uranus very briefly, just to understand its nature. And Uranus and Mars have some similarities. Like Uranus is electric, Mars is fire, pretty close. They're both about movement. But while Mars likes to move through that straight line and that trajectory, this is the discipline of Mars too, right? Uranus doesn't have much to do with this discipline. In fact, Uranus is like, you know what? You've been taking this path so many times. I want to break this path. I want to jolt you out of it. And this is how Uranus is a disruptor. It doesn't like the status quo. It wants to break the status quo. Mars is a soldier. It can fight for the status quo. So Uranus interrupts routines. It can dismantle all of our assumptions, the way that we have compartmentalized, categorized, and patternized our lives just to move through it. It can introduce variables that we've never anticipated before. And that's why it feels jolting. I know Uranus has been associated with this notion of awakening. And if you ever had a moment of awakening, you know that there's been massive disruption to your patterned ways of thinking and feeling. This is Uranus destroying that old paradigm that we were holding on to. And one of the things that happens when we don't have our old ways of knowing and moving in the world, we lose our sense of certainty. And I'd say this is one of the reasons why Uranus's jolting and movement can create so much chaos, at least initially, until we start to figure it out. But in general, as you can see, putting Mars and Uranus together, it can resemble something like splitting the atom. And we know what the outcome of that is, a nuclear reaction, which is just big boom. But let's not get too excited because we have to bring in the next variable, which is the sign of Gemini. And we have to remember Gemini is a dual sign. So we have these very two, in some ways, explosive planets in a moving sign. And the dual nature of signs is talking about something going from a fixed state, like a fixed sign, into a cardinal sign that wants to change its direction. So that dual component is neither here nor there. It can go here or there. So it's already creating some instability. That's the job of dual signs. And just in general, this is a sign that has a lot to do with relationships and the relationality of things. And its ruler is Mercury, which makes this sign super cerebral. It's a thinking sign. It's also about exchange, which is this facet of it that makes it about communication, interpretation, and sharing ideas. And all of this is meant to bring different facets and different components into relation with each other to be able to synthesize off of it. And like the ruler of the sign Mercury, the sign of Gemini has this component of constant comparing and contrasting things. And that's because it's trying to build some sort of an understanding through relationship and exchange of things. And this is why earlier in the video, I was saying, I want us to go a little bit more underneath this, more than the explosive external events that might happen that might be life-changing. Because when we bring Mars and Uranus, we're not just talking about external disruptive events. Underneath that, this signature is telling us in the sign of Gemini is that there's a disruption to the way that we're able to decipher and interpret reality. Like with this conjunction, it's going to be very common to have racing thoughts, this feeling like my brain is on fire. There's just this inability to focus. There's like massive amount of combustion up there. And when we're in these kinds of states of mind, it's very hard to interpret reality properly, accurately. And it's even harder to know how to deal with things that come up, even mundane things. And this kind of mode can become the precursor for us to change our ideas. And not just like once or twice, but several times in a day. It brings a sense of indecisiveness because there's constantly new variables in the mind that are coming into the picture. But there can also be a positive side to this because this conjunction can also indicate something about sudden insights. It can bring a new set of information into the picture that can suddenly change the trajectory of where we're going based on the information that we needed. The point is, everything with this, there's a lot of suddenness because Mars is a very impatient planet and Uranus brings that sense of suddenness. It's like a feeling of earthquake here. There was no earthquake a minute ago. Now there's an earthquake and everything within a matter of seconds is just shifting, jolting, and falling apart. And I want you to take into consideration why this is so dramatic. Again, two planets that are creating motion and a sign that is dual, that is constantly shifting itself. So it's creating a lot of instability. If we have this fixation right now on stability and wanting to know what it is that we should be doing, this is not a good time for that, because change in itself is a signature of this transit. But before moving on and talking more about this conjunction, I want to bring Mercury into the picture a little bit more too, because Mercury, as I mentioned, is the ruler of the sign of Gemini. And one of the things I want us to realize about the sign of Gemini is somewhat externally oriented. It's extroverted. And that's because it's a very social sign. It doesn't want to sit there and have a conversation by itself, to itself, have self-reflections. It doesn't communicate with other people. But the ruler right now, Mercury, is in the sign of Cancer, and it's in its retrograde motion. And I want us to realize the sign of Cancer couldn't be more different than Gemini, because it's introverted, it's inward, it's very quiet, it's cool, it's nighttime, it's about rest. And you have this planet that likes to move around or create agitation even at its worst, in this very like solitude, quiet kind of a place right now, retrograding. And considering the sign of Cancer is a cardinal sign, which is going deep within, is like dragging this retrograde Mercury deeper and deeper within. And there's another thing too. Gemini is a very cerebral sign, as I mentioned, is about thinking, where Cancer again is the opposite. It's not about the rational mind, it's about the emotional mind. It's about our subjectivity. Cancer doesn't remember facts. It remembers our emotional experiences and the imprints that they have left on us. The way that those imprints have now been retained as our emotional self. The way Cancer synthesizes information is through this emotional retention. Mercury and Gemini rely on external data points, bringing those into relation to create understanding. So they're very different. So while Uranus wants to create something new, evolve something, take it into its future, Mars wants to move towards that trajectory because it's being provoked right now. The ruler of Gemini, Mercury, is bringing old memories into the surface of our consciousness. And that means we're in the midst of this earthquake of new events, new ways of thinking and realization, but somehow our old memories are also being activated. They might even be the synthesis for this jolting that's happening in the present. Like Uranus wants to make us move towards that future, while Mercury is kind of like lingering on the memories of the past. And this can create a lot of misunderstandings too, right? Because you might be having a conversation with someone, let's say with your partner, with a friend, whomever at work, and there has to be this forward movement, but one person's kind of lingering on everything that has happened in the past. And then suddenly the situation becomes larger than life itself, and that's where the reactivity can also come through. So this conjunction is creating an uncomfortable psychological overlap where the past and the present are temporarily being intertwined, and it's kind of glitching out in terms of how we want to move into the future. And I think when it comes to our personal life with this transit, we should strive to separate them. Because as I said earlier, this is a cycle of Mars and Uranus interacting with each other. And once when we move out of the mundane astrology where we can talk about wars and all the external stuff that can happen, these transits are often saying things about us, as I was mentioning before. Sometimes a lot of the battlefields that we fight in this life is not external, it's internal. So I think taking this moment with this transit and understanding what that is right now is going to be beneficial for us in these cycles that are coming up between Mars and Uranus. And not only when they're conjunct, but when they're in square opposition, so that we'll know how to deal with this battlefield. And I am naming it a battlefield because when you put Mars and Uranus together, it's actually a signature for military, for fighting, for war. And also considering that Mercury is in a very inward sign, some of these battles right now can very much be within ourselves. Because if you think about it, most of the battles that we fight, most of the arguments that we have are within ourselves, not with other people. And even if we are going to have it with other people, we have those arguments within ourselves first. This is the Mars within us, creating that fight. That Mars within us is that voice that screams, this should not be happening. They shouldn't have said that. This wasn't my plan. This was not supposed to happen to me. These are all declarations of war that happens internally. And I want us to take note of our internal happenings, because when that inner war starts, its twin sister or twin brother is always resistance. First resistance and then reaction. But because we have Uranus in this equation too, that resistance can actually sometimes be our friend in the midst of a war and a fight, because it's creating that pause between stimuli and response. Like, we really feel like I need to destroy this person, but there's this resistance, like, if I act on this, I don't want to act on this. That is actually a good thing that happens with it. But this Uranus right now is accelerating this process from resistance to reaction. And considering it's also in the sign of Gemini, we're not going to take the time to try to understand, let's say, another person. And that means we can formulate conclusion before we even have sufficient information in our hands. So that impulse to act can be very quick. So that inner war can easily be taken to the outer world, and then the outer world will fight with us, and then we'll have the internal thing too, is it can just create craziness. And just to explain how this can happen, it can be about speaking very quickly without thinking about it. You just blurt something out, and Mars is really blunt, and Mars comes into the sign of Gemini. It can say the craziest shit. Like, whatever that it comes to its mind, it will say it and it will be sharp. And with Uranus here, the intention here is to jolt. And a lot of our relationships cannot withstand this. So we have to be mindful of that. This is about sending messages, especially with that Mercury retrograde, because you felt something so deeply emotionally insulting that you just write the email and press send. And afterwards, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I just pressed send. Now the consequences of it is going to be jolting, just the way the email was jolting to another person. This can be about quitting a job impulsively. Impulsivity becomes a very prominent thing, or ending a relationship suddenly. And again, Mars and Uranus are going to meet 3 times. You don't want to be in one of those relationships where you're constantly breaking up and getting back together. It's very disruptive to life. But this conjunction in general is just revealing how quickly we can get into that fight mode internally and externally, how fast things can change, how fast our minds can change, and how much energy is going to be required to deal with the uncertainty of all of these factors. Mars is about expenditure of energy. I just want us to realize our minds can feel like, again, it's on fire, and that should not make us trigger happy in this moment, as hard as it is. We just have to know that we are not at liberty to press that button that splits the atom. We could possibly nuke our entire life. I don't want to be dramatic, but this signature is dramatic. It can feel that way when you're on the ground zero of its experience, even if it's just 5 minutes long. But you might be asking yourself, well, how the hell do I do that if my mind feels on fire, and if the God of War is creating all of these battles? How do I get through this? And I want to give you guys a remedy that will be applicable for Mars, but not just Mars, almost all planets. And that is, when you have a malefic doing malefic things in your chart, let's just actually move away from Mars for a second. Let's say Saturn's doing Saturn things. You don't want to evoke Jupiter to come and remedy Saturn. You got to know how to deal with Saturn to remedy Saturn. And the same rule will apply to Mars. Like, Saturn will make life heavy. The way to remedy that is to increase your endurance for forbearance to be able to carry that weight. And at the end of it, when it's all said and done, you're stronger, because that is a definition of strength. How much load can you add, forbear it over time? That changes the entire system that's bearing the weight. It becomes stronger. The same thing, the same rule applies to Mars here. Like, sometimes we can't escape war, but to remain intact, we have to do what is necessary for war. So ironically, Mars here is offering a solution to the Martian problem that we have with Uranus right now, which is to cultivate a Martian, a Mars-like, warrior-like, soldier-like mind. And you know, some of us might have this impression soldiers just listen to command and obey commands. And they just act immediately on that. So they have the trajectory, they got the message, and they're just going to run with it. But the best and top soldiers rarely ever do that. They observe, they assess, and they adapt. Like, a trained soldier knows how to control that fiery mind. It knows that it's going to destroy its judgments. And when you look at soldier training, all of it is actually configured towards this. How to train the mind, the fast-moving external environment and the fast-moving internal environments, not to have excessive thoughts, not to have excessive emotions, not to ruminate, So, and during this conjunction, we shouldn't be thinking like a civilian. We should be thinking like a soldier, like that Mars, if we want to remedy the disruption that these two planets are bringing. And the first thing to do is to remember our first reaction is not always the correct action. Because reaction in itself is telling us something about an undisciplined mind. Like you slap me, I stab you. Not a good reaction. And we got to remember Mars without discipline is not just impulsive, it can become murderous. And we have to remember Mars without discipline is impulsiveness. But Mars with discipline, if we can discipline that Mars within us, what comes out of that is courage, bravery. And there's an enormous difference here because impulsivity, which can come out of this time, wants immediate relief. I'm angry. I just want to explode and externalize this anger. But if we can cultivate courage, it's courage that can bear uncertainty. It's actually courage that has the forbearance for pain and suffering. And sometimes to not react to the external stimuli, it brings about psychological, physical, emotional pain. It's insane how we feel it. And we want to relieve ourselves from it. But like a soldier, we got to know how to hold it. And we got to realize with an uncontrolled mind, an undisciplined mind, with this much fire and electricity around it, we're just going to react. And we have to realize we just lost the objective of a healthy Mars, which is to have a target, to have a goal, to be strategic. Mars is a very logical, strategic planet. This is a Mars that now just shooting at everything, wasting its bullet, killing innocent civilians, while working towards that soldier mentality right now is about keeping our eye on the ball. And I think another way, in a very practical way to get through this moment is not to believe every thought and every emotion as something absolutely real, accurate, and everlasting. This is also another way of creating that little bit of space between stimuli and response. And I want to say something unusual about Mars because the word peace actually belongs to Venus. But peace is not something that we have. Peace is something that we choose. And when the Mars within us is very disciplined, we actually have the capacity in this life to choose peace, even if we are in the midst of a storm. That's something to think about. It doesn't sound intuitively right, but peace is a choice. And I think when we are able to choose peace, we are also able to cultivate calm within. And with practice, this grows over time. And even when the mind is on fire, somehow we're able to remain very still, calm, and peaceful. Like if you think about it, anyone you can think of can remain calm and composed when everything's going according to their plan. But true character appears when your plans go out the door. So in some ways, this transit's also occurring to show us something about the character that we've become, the characteristics that we've built within. Like, do you really get that jolted out of your life, out of your head, out of your heart that fast? That's saying something about not having cultivated a strong enough character within. But if we can cultivate that peace and calm, nothing can really jolt us. We don't change based on changing circumstances. And I think if our character does change, if we kind of like get jolted out of who we are and what we are, this is just showing us that we need to prep ourselves. And I think this is the good thing with Mars and Uranus connection in the next few years. It's showing us our level of preparedness for life's nature, which again, I always say this in a lot of videos, is about change and flux. So one way to think of this conjunction is that it's asking us, how trained is your attention? How quickly do you become emotionally hijacked? How attached are you to certainty? Like, can you change your mind without feeling that your identity is about to shatter all over the place? Do you try to hold on? Do you lose that adaptability and that assessment that I was talking about the soldier has, which makes them a good soldier? Like, can you receive very unexpected news or information without defending your previous situation? Because a lot of times defending ourselves in a weird context is actually fighting other people. So in a lot of ways, this transit can be showing us our psychological muscles. Like, are they strong or are they weak? And like all muscles, they can be strengthened over time. And the way our psychological muscles get strengthened usually is through uncertainty, rapid, sudden change, unexpected things. But with all of that fighting and resisting and all of the things that we talked about, there's a gift, and that's related to Mercury's retrograde. And that's because Mercury right now in its retrograde motion is still moving very slow. We feel Mercury slowing down as something frustrating. And that's because usually that means our communication's becoming less effective and our sense of progress feels delayed. But considering that explosiveness that's in the air right now, maybe this is exactly what we need as a counterbalance. We need a Mercury that's going backwards, and we need a Mercury that is still slow in its motion. Because right now, Mars wants immediate action, and Uranus is asking for immediate change. But Mercury in its retrograde in the sign of Cancer is like, well, but I need to kind of feel that out first. So we're kind of remembering that we need to understand things, and understanding comes in stages. Sometimes the proper outcome of something comes through after 3 conversations. We get our message right after the 3rd revision. So Mercury right now could be helping us with not moving so fast towards premature outcomes. It's giving us that pause between stimuli and response. And truly, that is a blessing right now because things are moving super fast. Things are on fire, exploding. Atomic bomb wants to explode. It's just too much. This Mercury might be creating just enough tension points to slow things down a little bit. And if I may continue my run-on sentence, I think the deepest lesson of this conjunction is about what Mars and Uranus have in common in their symbolism, which is about freedom. Ultimately, by the time Mars makes this conjunction 3 times, we are supposed to understand something about the notion of freedom. And a lot of the fighting that could be happening is because we want to free ourselves from some previous situation with that Mercury retrograde, and that's why it's reflecting and so forth. And I feel that this Mars and Uranus, they're also showing us, because we always think we're free when our life is in a state of certainty. I have this money, I have this house, I have this relationship, then I'm free. Not understanding freedom in itself is not the absence of unpredictability. Freedom, again, is about remaining internally stable while unpredictability and change exist. And that's why earlier I was saying we have to choose peace and cultivate calm. And I've seen this all in my life. People who are just control freaks, they're trying to control every variable to create a sense of certainty. But life is keep happening to them and is showing it to them that I refuse to submit to this rule because it is not of my nature. It is not even of your nature. Why are you keep doing it? And they actually create so much disruption. I think this conjunction is also maturing us in a sense of understanding. There will always be unexpected conversations. There will always be unexpected endings and beginnings. There's always some variable or some information comes in for better or for worse. There's always sudden upward and downward movement in life. So the goal is not to be controlling the uncertainty. The goal has to be about becoming more disciplined like Mars. And we have Saturn in the sign of Aries too. And both of these planets have to do with discipline, but in different ways. Saturn is a discipline of negation. Mars is a discipline of action. We're learning something about this right now. And if we're disciplined like Mars and like Saturn, uncertainty, these moments of rupture and jolting, they're not going to destabilize us. And that is the psychological maturity of Mars. Like the external target can be shifting, but this Mars that has just been mastered always knows how to point towards that shifting target and knows how to control its breath, control itself, and how to put itself in the sign of Gemini in relation to the other. And I think all of us at some point in life have to come to this discovery, which is strength doesn't come from controlling the variables or from knowing the variables and knowing exactly what's going to happen. Strength comes from trusting our capacity to meet whatever the hell that it is that happens. And this is also one of the reasons why in this channel, I like to talk about our own internal processing of these transits. Because yes, astrology is the art of telling the time. An astrologer is nothing but a clock reader, is telling you what time it is for what crop of karma that's coming up. But why does that matter that we want to know? We still have to face it. And a lot of us don't even want to know because we just want to know what's good that's going to come up. But often There are many things that are not good, and we just have to be prepared in life to meet them, to learn, to grow, to overcome, to move on, and eventually to forget. And this brings us to the end of this transit video. I do have a closing, and before closing this video, ending it, I would like to ask you to like, share, and subscribe. And please do comment. I would love to hear how you're experiencing this Mars, Uranus, and Gemini, because it's going to be in a different house for everyone. And that house is talking about that theme of life. So pay attention to that. If it's in your fifth house, it could be related to children, your creativity, your romance. If it's in the seventh house, it's your relationships. In the 11th house, second house, could be related to your finances. Same with the eighth. So just pay attention to where it's occurring, how are you feeling it? How are you creating that pause between that stimuli and response? What are you planning to cultivate and learn? Because this is not the last time that Mars and Uranus are going to meet in the sign of Gemini. It's good for us to understand our own patterns and the external patterns that are happening also, so that we can choose peace eventually and to cultivate the calm. And of course, if you want a reading of the upcoming transits or to understand the blueprint of your life, which is your natal chart, you can go to my website at parisayazdi.com to learn more about how you can book your own session, or you can go to the email below in the description box of this video. I have my email there and you can contact me directly. And now to do a very short closing. So yes, Mars and Uranus are bringing tremendous amount of movement, and some of it is going to be exciting, some of it is going to be disruptive, some of it is going to be disturbing, and some of it is going to be impossible to predict. But I do want us to remember, beneath every external event that happens in our life, there's a quieter invitation for us, and that is always to observe before we react, to think before we conclude, and to separate today's reality from yesterday's memories. And I'll end the video with this wish for us. May this conjunction help us see the quickest aspect of our minds. But above that, for us to discover what it means to have a steadier mind, a more disciplined mind. And I say that because in our ever-changing world, the greatest advantage is not and no longer certainty. It is how composed we can show up into that world. And that's it for today. Sending you much love. Till next time.